Whoa. Oh no. Ow! Hi, my name's Gwen. In today's video, I'm going to show you how I ate squirrels, the recipe that I use, why I ate squirrels, because I think that's some relevant context here. So I'm a licensed falconer, which means that I train and hunt with birds of prey. I have a red-tailed hawk named Kara. If you watch my last video, you will have seen her. If you haven't seen it, I will link it here for you. She hunts some pretty cool stuff. She's a cool bird. Sometimes I get to eat what she catches, which is nice. That's not this bird though. This bird would almost certainly be eaten by a squirrel, so. Oh, she's fierce though. So yeah, let's get into it. So as a disclaimer, this video is obviously about hunting and eating meat, so I will be showing how I skin and clean the squirrels that I'm going to eat. So if you don't want to see that, just skip ahead. I'll have timestamps in this video. Now, you may be wondering, why the f would anybody eat a squirrel? In all seriousness though, squirrel meat is actually quite good. I never thought I'd be saying that, but it is. And more importantly, when the apocalypse comes, who do you think's gonna come out on top? Huh? The first squirrel that I ever ate, it actually had a nutty flavor to the meat, which I wish I was making that up. I'm not. Yeah, I was very pleasantly surprised by that. They don't all taste like that. It obviously depends on what they're eating. So, and out of all the squirrels that we catch, I only cook the biggest ones for myself to eat. If I can feel that there's not a lot of meat on the hind legs, then I don't bother, because it takes a lot of time and effort to actually go through skinning and gutting and cleaning them all and prepping the meat. You're really looking for the tick ones. Yeah. So I will be going over in detail what my recipe is and my process for making this fried squirrel recipe when we get to that part of the video. I've been trying to perfect this squirrel recipe for a few months now, if not longer. Yeah, actually probably like almost a year. The first squirrel recipe that I was using was a Louisiana Cajun squirrel stew recipe from a former coworker who was actually from Louisiana, and that was also a really good recipe. It turned the squirrel meat into like an imitation pulled pork, so if it weren't for the bones in the stew, you wouldn't know it was squirrel. And I just want to talk a little bit about why I'm so passionate about hunting responsibly and sustainable agriculture, and try to use this as an opportunity to provide a little bit of information beyond just, I like hunting and eating meat, you know, like, and if you want to skip ahead to the part where the woman just shuts up and does the cooking, you can. I won't blame you. I will a little bit, but it's fine. I agree that things like veganism and vegetarianism are beneficial in many ways, but I think that when those movements became mainstream, they missed the mark on the importance of local eating and local agriculture. And I say this because myself and friends of mine who are farmers and hunters have been verbally attacked by people in real life and on the internet for our lifestyles, for, you know, the things that we do that are important to us. And it's unfortunate because a lot of it is based on really uneducated, uninformed, narrow-minded opinions that aren't very based in reality. And of course you can say that reality is to a degree subjective, because, you know, what we just tell ourselves becomes our reality, right? So, I mean, it's kind of a complicated issue, but basically I just want to talk about why it's important people understand where their food comes from, and why it's important that people have a connection to the food that they're consuming. So, a bit of backstory. I grew up on a small hobby farm where we raised meat, chickens, and turkeys every other year to have as our own source of meat. We had laying hens, so we always had our own fresh eggs, and we had a vegetable and herb garden going pretty much every single year during the growing seasons. I think I was about 4 or 5 or 6 maybe when my parents brought me outside and showed me how they slaughtered our poultry for the very first time. And I remember being like obviously a little traumatized because I'd never seen it before, but then that was quickly replaced with a sense of awe of having that direct. Of course, this wasn't the language I would have used to describe it back then, but thinking back on the memory that I have, I know that in my little brain, I made the connection of, oh, like, that's what a chicken is, you know? Like, I knew that I was always eating meat, but I never really understood where it came from or what was involved in me having the opportunity to eat this food or that food or whatever it was. I think I was about 9 or 10 when I actually helped my mom slaughter the chickens and string them up in the trees in our yard. I'm just saying that out loud and realizing how it sounds, so do with that image what you will. But the Gwen, what is your point? Oh god. My point is that knowing where your food comes from, knowing how the animals that you're eating lived and died, knowing the conditions that your produce that you're eating were grown in and what it took to get all of these products to you is paramount. All of this ideally, I really strongly feel that it eliminates the possibility of disconnect on the end of the consumer and prevents people from not practicing gratitude for the food that they get to eat year round, whatever they want, whenever they want. Because if everybody, myself included, really knew and had to experience and deal with the often exploitative conditions that most of the foods and most of us eat are grown in, and like what it takes to get them to us and the consequences of it all, we might not want anything to do with a lot of it if you have a conscience. Also, side note on this topic, I will be including links in the description for resources for people to learn more about what I'm talking about or fact check the things that I'm saying. I also want to share 2 books that I read and learned a lot about all of this. The 100 Mile Diet and Animal Vegetable Garden, I believe, is the second one. Both of these books are beautifully written. They are so mind-boggling in there's just so much that goes into the global food trade that I never even considered and never even thought of. And the 100 Mile Diet goes back into human history quite significantly, and it's so illuminating. I really highly suggest people read these books if you're genuinely interested in learning more. So one of the things that I think veganism and vegetarianism got right is that the global food trade is whack. Okay, that shit is crazy, but again, you have to keep in mind that when we see a lot of this traumatizing and really upsetting footage of slaughterhouses and other forms of animal agriculture and how awful they are for the environment in so many ways, you have to realize that most of that footage is coming out of the States. From what I understand, here in Canada, our farmers don't operate on the same level as a lot of the States do. Somebody please correct me if I'm wrong, but that's just what I've seen and what I've heard about from other farmers that I know. My grandparents were from Holland. They fled during the Second World War. They've always been farmers. My mom grew up on the farm. I grew up on our small hobby farm. There's just so much more that goes into all of this than people realize who have never seen it before. So that's really this bridge that I'm trying to close. So for me, part of the reason why I hunt is that I want to have a direct connection to the food that sustains me, especially if it's coming from an animal. When my bird catches something, I'm responsible for dispatching it, and I don't think it gets more raw and personal than that, other than slaughtering chickens in my backyard with my mom when I was 10. And I wasn't a hunter before I became a falconer, and I actually really had a negative view of hunting and hunters for 2 reasons. One, my only exposure to hunting was limited, and I would hear these stories from a couple guys that I would go to school with, and I never felt that there was a lot of respect or understanding for the animals that they were hunting, and that never sat right with me. But the issue was that I never took it beyond that. I never actually tried to learn more about hunting, so I always just carried this really negative emotional bias against hunting for a very long time. And B, in a lot of ways, I carried the very narrow-minded view that I believed in my heart, I felt at the time that wild animals are precious, and they are, but that's not to say that all life isn't precious. And I've had people say to me directly, and I've seen a lot of articles online about this, I've seen this very common theme that people use in the vein of anti-meat or anti-hunting, that there's more than enough meat to eat in the grocery store, so nobody should be hunting. That should not exist in our world today because we have grocery stores. It doesn't get more out of touch with reality than that. Do you not realize that the meat in the grocery store is still an animal? It doesn't matter that it's wild or not. It is still an animal. And if anything, I would rather 100 times over eat meat that has been hunted than meat that I get from the grocery store, because I will have known how that animal lived, how it died, where it came from, how it was processed, and what it took to get it to me. And that is so important. I don't want this to sound like it's a rant piece about meat versus no meat versus hunting versus anti-hunting versus whatever. I'm just trying to provide a little bit of insight or a reminder for people that knowing where your food comes from matters. Knowing what it took to get to you matters. Knowing how the farmers that produce that food for you on the other side of the world so that you can eat it year round whenever you want, knowing how they were compensated and how they're treated matters. And again, like I said, how can you, if you are armed with that knowledge or a direct connection for seeing firsthand where the food you're eating has come from, how can you not feel anything but grateful and also in awe of what this land provides for us? So my point with all of this is that local eating, local agriculture is, I believe, the antidote for a lot of the negatives that come from things like the global food trade and from large-scale industrial animal agriculture, as well as ethical hunting, obviously. So I actually have to apologize also for some of the audio in this next bit. I actually had to re-record this whole part after the day that I skinned and cooked the squirrels. My audio hookup to my camera was just a little funky and there's a lot of background hiss, so... What are you doing? What are you doing? Are you laying down? Is she laying down? I thought she was standing, but I think she's laying down. Are you happy in the sun? Yeah. What are you doing? I think she's laying down. Oh. Hi. Oh yeah, there you are. Hi, sorry I bothered you. Somebody watching this who is from the United States, where I think you also have eastern gray squirrels, can you please tell me what the hell the difference is between your squirrels and my squirrels? Because these squirrels, the skin is next to impenetrable. Like, you saw what happened. The skin was so tough that like the bones of the squirrel broke apart before the skin peeled. Or maybe I am just doing something wrong. Please tell me. I am not an expert. I'm just doing this for fun. Ugh. There we go. Now we have a partially prepared tree rat for eating. This is the meat that I've gotten from one squirrel. You can kind of see how there's a fair bit on the back legs, and we'll get some back straps out of this. And Mm-mm-mm. How is that squirrel? Ew. Okay, here we go. Well, that's good. So if you made it to the end of the video, thank you for watching. I had a bit of fun putting this together, so I hope it was at least a little bit interesting to watch. I'll be working on another video very soon talking about how I trained Kara to hunt with my drone. So I got some really neat footage out of that and I'm really excited to put it together and show you guys. So stay tuned for that and see you in the next video. Bye!